Okay, let me explain briefly what a PMI is. A PMI is pluses, minuses, and interesting points. And when you approach anything, right, and you don't want to, spend a whole lot of time looking at the affective, the affective valence or how it makes you feel, or you don't want to necessarily look at it from an optimistic or pessimistic point of view. You just want to be neutral. What you do is you look at a situation and you look at the positives, you look at the negatives, but most importantly, the interesting points, the PMI. And so, for example, when discussing, let's discuss a llama that I know of that is fairly well known and part, I notice, of a large movement to bring Tibetan teachings to the West. And I think that's fantastic, and I think they're going to be successful. So this particular Lama, in terms of the positive things, she takes care of people who don't have jobs. She takes care of students who wander, to Nepal or Tibet or India. I don't know where they go, but anyway, and so she helps them get their head on straight and makes them realize that if you don't have skills and you can't work, then you don't eat. The famous Zen saying, the 7th century Chan master who said, I think it was the 6th patriarch who said, a day without work is a day without eating, or a day without food. And so some people need to learn that basic thing, that all beings work without reception. And then she also deals with a lot of, or he, however it may be, deals with a lot of, ailments, and she uses folk medicine. And so she's saturated in that culture, and she probably knows a lot of powerful remedies that have been used in folk situations. So other positives is that, these lamas tend to be very knowledgeable because they've spent years and years and years, many times living in India, for example, in Dharamsala, or in Nepal or Bhutan or wherever they live with the monks. And so they become very, very authoritative about their particular strand. So, and he is a lovely guy. I mean, he's a wonderful guy, and he's very well intentioned. So the minuses are that in this work, to some extent, you can decide what your own priorities are, what your own ambitions are by looking at the product. Now, some people want nothing more than to be like Osho, or, to have 6 Bentleys and have everybody adore you and just sit there on high and make pronouncements and it looks like he doesn't have a problem in the world, which is not true, but, so that might be more of a, again, I hate to generalize, but more of a kind of a Hindu path. But what you see is what you get, right? You know what the end product looks like. With Buddhism, people tend to use the Dalai Lama and his as an exemplar, and that's very well founded. And the monks are wonderful people, but for the most part, they're monks. Okay, so that's a limitation, right? Possibly. So that would be a minus. Another minus would be there's a great temptation to use some of these powerful psychiatric techniques with Westerners to treat psychological conditions. And I've watched gurus do this. They'll prescribe, for example, a tantric visualization practice to treat PTSD or something like that. And the problem is you can associate the two. If you're not careful, you can associate the two, and now you've got a negative connotation, association to, Manjushri or whatever. So you got to kind of know what you're doing, unless you're dealing with trivia, which she may be doing, which in case it's just an interesting point. And then, of course, there's the notion that in the modern world, and even the Dalai Lama says this, we don't need more Buddhists. We don't need more Bon shamans. We don't need more, Theravadan mendicants. As lovely as those people are, what this world needs now is, of course, more kindness, but also more understanding. And so whenever someone goes too deeply for too long into any tradition, I don't care what it is, if they're unable to also keep abreast of the rest of the world, including the modern technological world, then those lamas could be less useful than they might be otherwise. Now, a safeguard that most Tibetan lamas have is that they are affiliated, and clearly so, with the Dalai Lama, and they wear the robes and the imprimatur. That means there's somebody above them. And so this is the problem when you have a formalized systems of hierarchies, and there's nobody looking over, say, the Zen master. And see, the kinds of problems with sociopathy that we get into in the history of Zen in America, we do not get into in Tibet in the same way, to the same extent, because there's always someone higher up to appeal to. And so when you take those things away, that could be very, very positive for many people. It could be a negative for some people, but it's an interesting point because it makes the possibility of severe character disorders rising up through the ranks. And we know from experience that people with very bad characters can get pretty far from the outside in the way, and they oftentimes fool others, gullible others. So that's a quick PMI on American Lamas. These guys are great. I like them, and there's women now even that are teaching. And I think that that's a conscious effort on the Dalai Lama's part, and more power to him, and I hope it builds and builds. So I'll stop with that, but that's kind of a summary of that. Now, if you're going into Tibetan Buddhism and what you want to be as a Buddhist, then everything I said, disregard and do what you're told by your Lama. All right?